So let's get into the business items. The first item for discussion, item 301, cases 19E0105 et al., as they relate to the joint proposal filed on December 18, 2019, to resolve penalty amounts for alleged violations by New York State Electric and Gas and Rochester Gas and Electric, presented by Administrative Law Judge James Costello. Judge Costello, please begin.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman Rhodes and Commissioners. Item 301 is a proposed Commission order adopting the terms of a joint proposal between Department of Public Service staff, New York State Electric and Gas Corporation, which I will refer to as NYSEG, and Rochester Gas and Electric Corporation, which I will refer to as RG&E. Under the terms of the joint proposal, NYSEG and RG&E agreed to pay penalties for admitted violations of their emergency response plan in connection with several major storms that occurred during the winter and spring of 2018, which included winter storms Riley and Quinn. As a result of the 2018 winter and spring storms, which left more than 500,000 New York homes and businesses without power, some for as long as 10 days, Governor Andrew Cuomo initiated an investigation into utility preparedness and response. The Department of Public Service staff conducted the in-depth investigation to determine whether the companies properly prepared for and responded to the 2018 winter and spring storms in compliance with their annually filed emergency response plan, which the companies are required to file pursuant to the Public Service Law, Commission regulations, and Commission orders. The Department of Public Service staff engaged in substantial public outreach to better understand the issues and problems experienced during the 2018 winter and spring storms. Among other things, staff conducted various public statement hearings across the state at which numerous customers and public officials provided both written and oral comments. Staff also conducted interviews with state, county, city, and town officials and reviewed complaint data filed with the Department's Office of Consumer Services. After the investigation, the Department issued a report identifying for NYSEG and RG&E 24 potential regulatory violations, 20 by NYSEG and 4 by RG&E, resulting from their failure to follow their emergency response plan. The report also made 77 recommendations for corrective actions to be implemented by the companies in their emergency response plan. On April 18, 2019, the Commission issued an order directing the companies to show cause why the Commission should not pursue civil penalties pursuant to Public Service Law Section 25 or administrative penalties pursuant to Public Service Law Section 25-A, and why the companies should not implement the 77 recommendations made in the staff report. On May 20, 2019, the companies filed a document accepting all 77 of the staff's recommendations, proposing minor modifications to 8 of those recommendations. The companies and Department of Public Service staff also engaged in settlement negotiations with respect to the alleged regulatory violations. On December 18, 2019, the companies filed a joint proposal signed by the companies and by Department of Public Service staff. NYSEG admitted in the joint proposal to 18 violations, and RG&E admitted to 3 violations, and stipulated that their actions with respect to those violations did not comply with their emergency response plan, the Commission orders adopting and approving that emergency response plan, and 16 New York CRR Part 105 of the Commission's regulations. In a statement filed in support of the joint proposal, Department of Public Service staff explained that, based upon factual clarifications made in the course of the settlement negotiations, staff determined not to pursue 2 of the alleged violations against NYSEG and 1 of the alleged violations against RG&E that were alleged in the order to show cause. With respect to the 21 violations to which the companies admitted in the joint proposal, the companies agreed to pay a penalty amount of $10.5 million. $9 million on behalf of NYSEG and $1.5 million on behalf of RG&E. Those funds will be paid by the company's shareholders and will be used for the benefit of the company's electric ratepayers. Negotiation on the specific manner in which the funds will be used has been referred to the company's pending electric rate cases and will be subject to input from interested stakeholders in those cases. The $10.5 million amount represents the full penalty amount that could be assessed for each of the 21 regulatory violations to which the companies admitted. It is the largest penalty amount ever in New York State for the failure to follow emergency response procedures. The draft order before you recommends that the Commission adopt the joint proposal as in the public interest. The parties to the joint proposal follow the appropriate procedures required by the Commission's settlement guidelines. It contains an admission by the companies to 21 violations and provides for a significant amount of funds to be paid by the company's shareholders for the benefit of the company's electric ratepayers. The joint proposal ensures that such ratepayers will timely receive the benefits of the settlement amount without the risk and delay of further litigation. The settlement amount was reached among normally adversarial parties and falls within the reasonable range of results that could have been expected if the penalty proceedings had been fully litigated. No comments in opposition to the joint proposal have been received. This concludes my presentation. I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. My own comments are that this is an important item. It relates to failures in storm response that caused meaningful complications for many of New York's citizens. I'm looking around and I note that many of us in this room were deployed in the field during some of you are nodding, during these events, and there was a lot to do. I think the penalties are appropriate. I think the remedies are appropriate. I think the company's admission of its failures is appropriate and reflects an important element of candor and ownership of the issues. And I'm pleased that it's one of the important outcomes of a really strong investigation and a strong set of recommendations that flowed from those events. So this is a good and strong outcome, and I'm going to be in favor. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. So I'm going to be concurring, but I want to sort of give some consideration for how I came to this determination. In April 2019, when it came before the Commission for an order to show cause, I voted no. I was concerned about the process, and I was concerned about us not following our proper regulations and settlement guidelines. And I believe that was the right decision. And I also am incorporating those comments into the record as it applies still, because I think that threshold matter still exists, and the comments that I made at that time I think are still relevant in terms of what we're doing with order to show causes and the real need for the Commission to have a clear process that will that really abides by, I think, a fair and appropriate review. Being that as it may, I need to look under the hood and see, since that time, what the process has been and what some of the resolution proposals are, to be able to make now a fair determination based on what's before us now, rather than sort of staying to where I thought we should have gone back in April. From my perspective, I think that some of the reasons that helped me vote in favor of this is that there was filed a response to some of the concerns, and NYSEG filed that substantively and gave their perspective, as well as filing that they were engaged in exploratory discussions. And the Secretary, a number of occasions, extended the time requirements based on the fact that there were exploratory discussions occurring. That's in line with the settlement guidelines. And then NYSEG counsel, I think, appropriately so, and kudos to NYSEG counsel, filed a letter acknowledging that now settlement discussions were underway, settlement negotiations were underway, and filed pursuant to the settlement guidelines that notification letter, which is not just on NYSEG or utilities, but it's really for any party to make sure that that's properly filed. In this case, it was NYSEG. So that gave notice that that was going on. There was the only two parties that were involved in those discussions were staff and NYSEG. And then a settlement joint proposal came out of that. In looking at it from my perspective, NYSEG also admitted to some of the violations. Looking at that in a whole, and also seeing how they had also filed properly, that they were undertaking settlement negotiations, exploratory discussions, and then settlement negotiations, as well as engaging in trying to give as much information as they could to the public, even understanding the confidentiality of the settlement discussions. And in fact, during this time period from April 2019 to now, they also incorporated many of the emergency response plan changes that were recommended. And so we had that also as well, and we approved those changes in the ERP for the 2018 ERP. And since that time also, December of 2019, NYSEG, as well as all of the utilities, filed their updated ERPs, which we should be, if it's not SAPID already, it would be, they would all be SAPID, and then we'll be incorporating that. So from my perspective, I do think that this was an attempt to follow the regulations, as well as to, in good faith, enter into discussions. I do note that you stated, ALJ Costello, that it was the joint proposal was entered into between normally adversarial parties. I'm not sure if I would categorize staff and utilities as normally adversarial. Normally, when I look at the fact that we're bringing together normally adversarial parties, it's a larger group of people, and so categorizing just the staff and the utilities as, meeting that threshold, I'm not sure that I would that I feel as comfortable, and I don't know that that's actually the intent behind it. So I just raise that because when I look at we should try to have more than just staff and utilities engaged in this. However, I think a thing that for me is very helpful is that, and I'm very mindful of, is that the settlement of the joint proposal looks at future engagement with more stakeholders by having the actual dollars that have now been decided to go, in this case, into the rate case for further evaluation and discussion on what that would mean. Initially, I was concerned about that because I was concerned about having those dollars go into the rate case that may dilute the appropriate evaluation of what to do with those dollars as it relates to the settlement and the violations. I did look at the public service law under section, public service law section 66, 21, or actually 22. It says that and this is under the emergency response plans, it says that the commission shall permit the recovery through rates established pursuant to this section of all payments made. And it allows the ability for us to take that money and defer it to the rate case for consideration. However, I do think we need to, and that doesn't mean that we must, but it is something that we could look at as an appropriate avenue, whether it's done through the joint proposal in totality and addressing that, or in the rate case. For me, I think I need to be extremely mindful and share it publicly that whether it is decided in a settlement joint proposal that comes before us, or whether it's decided in the rate case itself, it is really important that the monies that we're looking at and what we're looking to then utilize it for, whatever programs we may be establishing through that there is a true benefit cost analysis that is engaged in on what we are doing with those dollars, as well as looking at the long-term implications of any new programs that may come out of a settlement, or in this case through the rate case, because we want to make sure that some of our policy decisions or decisions on how to utilize those dollars are really being done prudently, but also making sure that it's, while in one case the shareholders may have borne the cost, to the extent that then it may have long-term implications for the continuation of a program after those shareholder dollars are used up. We need to make sure that we are being very mindful of that. And taking that into consideration, because then that does affect future ratepayer dollars that may come. And then the other thing I would just say from that perspective is that we also need to have in what we are doing the flexibility for any future innovation or processes that may come out of the lessons that we're learning from future storms. And so while we may be looking at it in terms of whether there was a violation, to the extent that future actions, and this is why it's important for the commission itself to approve the plans, they really are a living document that is supposed to be continually incorporating the lessons learning and helping to set some behavioral and organizational changes, and for folks to know how to, in events, what's expected. But understanding that the public service law is very clear about the commission itself adopting those plans, and the reason for that when the law was established was because even though we had always had emergency response plans, they'd never come before the commission, and now it was really important, out of the lessons learned from Superstorm Sandy, that the commission needed to take an active role in that. And that's why, for me, it's really important from a lot of the intent behind Public Service Law 66 is about and the law itself goes into quite a bit about the commission and the review process and the necessity for following due diligence in our investigations, and the commission itself having a very strong role in helping to set the tone of what is expected. In light of all of that, there are still some gaps in our procedural process that and gaps between how we operate with other orders to show causes that don't necessarily match up. It's really important from regulatory certainty, not just for the staff and not just for the companies, but for the public itself, to have a clear understanding of what the pathways are and what the expectations are. And from my perspective, I plan to get under the hood more on the emergency response plans that will be coming before us in some future date for adopting, because we do now have, since the law has been established, a significant amount of history, positive and negative, that we can look at to ensure that we're setting adopting the right emergency response plans with the focus on what does that mean in going forward. And so I'm going to be voting, I'm going to be concurring, and I thank you for all your hard work on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Releasy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be supporting this. I think it's a good proposal. It is for the customer's benefit. It will result in a benefit to the public as well. It comes at a cost to the shareholders and not to the customers. I think that we should not forget how we got here, however, even though this is good news that we've gotten this agreement without going through litigation. We got here through some admittedly wrong deeds on the part of the companies, as they admit themselves. And we should hope that history does not repeat itself. Having said that, I should also remark on your comments as to how much time and effort went into this from members of the department, and I add my personal thanks for all of that effort as well. I'll be supporting this.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards.
Thank you. Of the 77 recommendations, how many of them have already been implemented?
I don't have that information. I know that what they've agreed to is implement that, and they are working with Department of Public Service staff on an ongoing basis to make sure that those recommendations are implemented.
Okay. Would you be able to provide me, after this, the 77 recommendations and an expected date of completion, if the staff could do that?
I will.
Okay? All right, great. Thank you. I'll be voting in favor.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
I think first I want to congratulate the staff and for the hard work we've done on this. This really does send a very strong signal to the utilities, not just these two companies, but utilities writ large, about the issues surrounding storm response. Tens of thousands of customers were affected, not only with their loss of service, but I think more crucially, since I was actually on site for most of these outages, was the lack of accurate information being provided to not only customers, but local elected officials. Time and time again, the biggest frustration was, we know that there was a bad storm. We know trees come down. We know lines are taken down. But tell us when and where the restorals are going to be accurately so citizens, customers, and local governments can plan effectively. I know these issues will be a large focus in the ongoing case, particularly as it may relate to vegetation management. However, the most important thing is improving communications between the companies and the affected localities and the customers involved. On a personal note, I found that particularly unacceptable. So I am going to vote in favor of this measure and thank everybody again. And hopefully this sends a signal that this commission is very serious about companies living up to their obligation to provide service even under the most difficult circumstances.
Thank you. With that, I will proceed to call for a vote. My own vote is in favor of the recommendations to adopt the terms of the joint proposal as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
I concur.
Commissioner Lisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
The item is approved and the recommendation is adopted. Thank you. We will now move to the next three items. As these items all involve the same company, staff will present all three items and then address questions and seek comments from the commissioners. We will then proceed to vote on each item individually. Item 401A, Case 16W0259, which is the proceeding on motion of the Commission as to the rates, charges, rules, and regulations of New York American Water Company, presented by Mike Reeder, Deputy Director of Rates and Tariffs. Tim Canty, Chief of Water Policy, Steve Kramer, Assistant Counsel, and John Sipos, Deputy General Counsel, are available for questions. Mike, please begin.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. Item 401A addresses the petitions filed by New York American Water to recommence a modified levelization surcharge and to substitute and expand the number of capital projects recovered under its system improvement charge mechanism. On May 18, 2017, the Commission issued an order approving a 4-year rate plan for New York American Water, which included authorization for the recovery of, through its system improvement charge mechanism, 9 capital projects totaling $38.6 million. Additionally, in order to mitigate rate year 1 bill impacts, the Commission levelized the revenue increases over the term of the rate plan. Under the levelized revenue increases for Service Area 1, which is largely comprised of the Lynbrook District and includes several small water systems, a portion of the levelized revenue increase for Rate Year 3, that's the 12 months ending March 31, 2020, and Rate Year 4, the 12 months ending March 31, 2021, would be collected through the levelization surcharge. At the end of the rate plan, the surcharge will end so that base rates are not higher than they would have been if the revenue increases had not been levelized. On February 25, 2019, New York American Water filed a petition requesting authorization to postpone the Rate Year 3 levelization surcharge for Service Area 1 customers that was set to go into effect on April 1, 2019, and then recommence a modified levelization surcharge on April 1, 2020. The company also requested to substitute and expand the number of capital projects recovered under its system improvement charge mechanism from $38.6 million, as approved in the rate order, to $57.1 million, and requested approval to deploy advanced metering infrastructure, or AMI. If its proposals were adopted by the Commission, the company indicated that it would agree to not file for a base rate increase for a period of 1 year. On February 27, 2019, the Commission approved the postponement of the Rate Year 3 levelization surcharge for Service Area 1 and deferred action on the other matters raised in the company's initial petition to a future date. If the Rate Year 3 levelization surcharge had gone into effect, the company would have collected approximately $4.5 million from Service Area 1 customers over the year. On November 25, 2019, New York American Water filed supplements and amendments to its initial petition related to its proposed capital projects. The supplemental petition includes updates to the cost estimates of certain capital projects and a change in the scope for its AMI project. Overall, the company reduced its cost estimates by about $6 million in its supplemental petition. In addition, the company filed a benefit cost analysis that indicates that AMI has a benefit cost ratio greater than 1. AMI implementation will provide customers interval meter data to evaluate their consumption and make informed conservation decisions to achieve overall cost savings on their water bills. Customers will be able to view their granular usage data via the My Account customer portal, which also provides access to monthly billing and online payment options. AMI will also allow customers to sign up for and receive continuous flow alerts and high bill alerts. For the company, AMI will allow it to improve its ability to plan and manage its resources to meet the peak demands of its system while providing the company more granular system data to assist with determining the amount of non-revenue water and understanding customer usage patterns. Understanding customer usage patterns will allow New York American Water to better design programs to meet the needs of its customers and to provide useful tips to customers on how to reduce their bills. In addition to AMI, New York American Water proposes to defer 2 of the previously approved System Improvement Charge projects in Service Area 1, namely the reconstruction of Plant 4 and Plant 6 iron removal facilities. This is due to the reduced water usage in its service areas resulting from the company's conservation program. The company proposed 7 additional System Improvement Charge projects to further upgrade its system. These projects are comprised of various main replacement projects to address water quality and fire protection issues, improvements to production plants number 5 and number 20, a filter plant expansion, and a well redrill, all of which are necessary capital investments that will allow the company to continue to provide safe and adequate service. On November 20, 2019, American Water Works Company, New York American Water's parent company, announced that it had entered into an agreement to sell New York American Water to Liberty Utilities. To date, the companies have not filed a petition seeking the Commission's review and approval of the transaction. In the draft order before you, it is recommended that the Commission approve the company's proposed substitution and expansion of the number of projects recoverable through its System Improvement Charge mechanism. This will allow the company to make smart investments for the benefit of its customers. It is further recommended that the Service Area 1 levelization surcharges for Rate Year 3 and Rate Year 4, which are scheduled to become effective on April 1, 2020, be postponed and incorporated into the Commission's expected proceeding that will evaluate if the acquisition of New York American Water by Liberty Utilities is in the public interest. That concludes my presentation of Item 401A. I now turn it over to Tim Canty to present Item 401B. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Item 401B addresses the sale of New York American Water property to the Village of Seacliff. As part of the consent order issued on September 11, 2018, New York American Water agreed to contribute $1 million of shareholder money towards the sale of one of its properties to the Village of Seacliff. On October 3, 2019, New York American Water and the Village filed a joint petition seeking approval to transfer utility property to the Village. Staff reviewed and audited the joint filing to determine that the transaction is consistent with the consent order and is in the public interest. Item 401B approves the sale of that property to the Village for $1.6 million, which breaks down $600,000 from the Village and $1 million from American Water shareholders. The order finds that the sale of property should not impact reliability, safety, or operations of New York American Water, since the property is used as office space and storage. The sale price of $1.6 million for this property, which has been designated as a historic landmark, is reasonable and supported by independent appraisals. And the order finds the sale is in the public interest as required by Section 89H of the Public Service Law. The net proceeds of this sale will be passed back as a credit on customers' bills. We estimate that a typical Seacliff customer using approximately 4,000 gallons per month should see about $171 credit on their bill. This credit is based on volumetric usage, so the actual bill credit will vary from customer to customer. The Village plans to use this partially donated property as recreational space open to the public. So Seacliff customers will receive a large credit on their bills and have a new recreational space once this sale is complete. In addition, the village will withdraw its Article 78 proceeding that is currently pending against both New York American Water and the Commission. Customers will be released from any future environmental liabilities associated with the property, and customers will see future reductions in rates due to the avoided property tax expense on this property, which will flow to them through the property tax reconciliation mechanism. And now I will turn it over to Eric Ryder to discuss item 401C.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Item number 401C before you today is a draft order regarding New York American Water and its final implementation plan to improve customer service and communications. It is recommended that the Commission approve the final implementation plan with modifications to include further reporting requirements and further improvements to certain deliverables. As Mr. Reeder explained, on May 18th, 2017, the Commission approved a 4-year rate plan for New York American Water, which included inclining block rates designed to encourage conservation of water. Shortly after the start of the second rate year of New York American Water's rate plan during the summer of 2018, nearly 2,000 customer bill complaints were filed with the company. Most of these complaints were related to the lack of notice specific to the inclining block rate, which led to significant and unexpected bill impacts. The company was required to hire an independent monitor at shareholder expense to, among other things, review the cause of the increased complaints related to the new rate structure and New York American Water's response to the complaints. On October 18, 2018, the Commission approved the selection of PA Consulting Group, or PA Consulting, as the independent monitor. PA Consulting's final report was submitted to staff on June 26, 2019. Regarding the increase in customer complaints, PA Consulting found that New York American Water's failure to adequately communicate the inclining block rate structure and the pressing need for additional conservation efforts to its customers was the primary cause. New York American Water submitted an interim implementation plan in conjunction with PA Consulting's final report on June 26, 2019, in which New York American Water accepted all of PA Consulting's recommendations. For each recommendation, the company identified the steps it has taken or will take to implement the recommendation, the timing of such, and how New York American Water will demonstrate that it has completed those steps. On July 11, 2019, the Commission approved the independent monitor's final report in an order that I will refer to as the interim order that established deliverables to improve customer service and communications. The interim order sought comments on New York American Water's interim plan to implement the report's recommendation and directed the company to meet with staff not less than 30 days after the completion of the SAPA review period, or post-summer review, to review any comments received as well as a review of the company's performance during the summer of 2019. The Commission also directed the company to submit a final implementation plan to the Secretary within 30 days of the post-summer review. On October 31, 2019, the company met with staff to discuss its performance and stated that due to its outreach efforts, primarily mailers and social media that inform customers about water conservation, high bill complaints decreased by 46% from May through October 2019 when compared to the same period in 2018. More specifically, a year-over-year comparison of complaints for July and August were reduced by 45%. In addition, the company stated that 15% of Tier 4 customers in 2018 conserved the following year in the summer of 2019 and were not billed Tier 4 rates. On January 6, 2020, New York American Water filed its final implementation plan. The company supplemented the filing on January 22nd, 2020. The company's final implementation plan provides further improvements or updates to certain deliverables in 7 categories. I'll briefly describe each improvement or update. First, the billing cycle proration policy. After consultation with staff, the company further tightened the proration policy in its final implementation plan to a 28 to 32-day billing cycle, and states that it will be able to refine the billing cycle to a more consistent 30 to 31-day billing cycle with implementation of automatic metering infrastructure, or AMI. The company also proposed to add language to its tariff to define its proration policy. Second is the issue of high bill exceptions. In the company's supplement filed on January 22nd, it lowered the high bill exception threshold through the use of its billing program and stated that the number of notifications was reduced by 52% from 2018 to 2019. Third is complaint root causes. The company's final implementation plan provided a 6-month complaint analysis for the 8 received commission complaints, detailing the root cause and the actions taken to address those complaints. Most notably, the company provided customer courtesy adjustments for high bill complaints without challenging the customer positions, and reinstated customer installment plans that were defaulted because of financial hardships. Fourth is budget billing impact to conservation. The company indicated in its final implementation plan that it was unable to determine if budget billing would undermine conservation efforts because it did not have a statistically valid sample of customers to conduct such an analysis. It has 170 customers on budget billing out of 126,000 total customers. However, AMI would allow the company to provide a future detailed analysis utilizing real-time data. Fifth is no contact letters. This type of letter was improved in the company's final implementation plan by adding language to inform customers where they can go to find tips for conservation measures, either by visiting the company's website or contacting the company directly by phone. 6 is estimated meter read trends. In calendar year 2019, the company reduced its estimated meter reads by approximately 1/3. Seventh is the company's complaint reduction strategy. The company's supplement filed on January 22nd improved the complaint reduction strategy to include specific objectives, goals, targets, and initiatives. In the draft order before you, it is recommended that the Commission approve the final implementation plan, require New York American Water to file a proposal that further refines the company's billing cycle period in concert with its AMI plan, require the company to file tariff amendments to effectuate the billing cycle period changes, direct New York American Water to file periodic reports regarding billing cycle compliance, estimated reads, and customer complaints, and require New York American Water to file a plan to complete the budget billing analysis with its AMI plan. This concludes our presentations, and we are available for any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Taken together, this is a package that provides much better outcomes for New York American Water's customers. The rate effect of postponing the levelization surcharge, the benefits in the Seacliff community flowing from the property transfer, the information availability flowing from AMI, and a responsible plan on customer service and communications, not just as a matter of that's the correct way to behave, although that's pretty important, but as you've laid out, communications actually allow us to achieve the policies and outcomes and conservation and the like for the customers. I think this is, as I said, a good package, and I'm going to be in favor. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. For A, B, and C, so for the three different items, the levelization, the A, B is the sale of the property, and then C is the implementation plan. All three followed a proper, in my view, process in terms of making sure that there was proper notice and comment period for folks to weigh in, and also engaging in deliberate review. For me, I had concerns on how the original American Water settlement came about and the process, and still stand by that. However, these, first of all, 401A was outside of that settlement. It wasn't part of the settlement discussions. And B and C did flow after the fact with then proper notice and review. So I feel very comfortable voting in favor of all of these. I think it's really important for me to explain my sort of review process, in particular on the item A. I was one of two commissioners who voted in 2017 for the rate case. At that time, I did indicate that I was concerned about a lot of the customer impacts on that. A significant portion of that was the impact from the taxes. But since that time, I think we have learned a lot of really good lessons. I think it's also really important for us to look very carefully at the importance in communication. The theme really, even from the first item we had today on 301, really shows that communication with customers is really vital, and communication with sort of all stakeholders, including local and state officials as well. So I think that's a really important lesson, and we could see in C with the implementation plan just how much the company, and in particular the relevant hands-on-the-ground staff at American Water have really been doing an incredible job of trying to engage with the customers in a way that they had not really had to before that. And so I think that's really a significant organizational improvement. It's also important, and the order lays out a really clear analysis of the AMI program and the importance of that for communication and engagement, but also the true prudent review that was done on that AMI. I think AMI is not just limited to water utilities. We've had success in other utilities where AMI has been instituted, and there are some pending AMI in other utilities that I think we need to really take a close look at as well, in terms of helping from the communication aspects of it, that the benefits are there. Private water companies can provide crucial capital for water infrastructure improvements. In our case, we have allowed, instead of just doing it through rate recovery, we allow it through, in the water cases, from the system improvement charge. That allows some flexibility and also is something that then, once the charge has been paid, it goes away and it doesn't continue into the rates. So the SIC can be a very important mechanism. Many water companies, both public and private, are dealing with the need for upgrading their aging infrastructure. And therefore, these capital projects are something that can be very vital, and it's very important for us to make sure that they're prudently done. I think it's a credit to both the company and our staff for looking carefully at the capital improvement projects and not just locking into what had been approved back in 2017, but really trying to be flexible in terms of what is actually needed and helping with that pathway forward and allowing that flexibility, but also the prudency of not giving the money until we see that the projects have been done, and also how well they've been done. And so working through that, I think, is important. I paused initially when I saw that we would be postponing the levelization surcharge. It is something that is unique in these circumstances, but for these circumstances, I would not be supportive of postponing because I think that when we look at levelization surcharge, when we look at levelizations of rates and surcharges in rate cases, it's really important that we are not sending a message that we are postponing until after the fact the collection of those, if that means then that at that time when it gets close to when that new surcharge or rate would go into effect, we would just seek to petition or have someone petition to stop that. So here, this is very different because this postponement is because of the unique circumstances. In particular, the potential future acquisition. And we are also not saying that this levelization surcharge, while postponed, means that the interest cannot accrue. It will, and that means for the company, they have some flexibility in being okay with the postponement. The order also allows them to decide, if they don't want to postpone this, then to come in and seek rate recovery. So it gives some flexibility for some business case analysis and also working towards what makes sense for working with their customers. From my perspective, this does a really good job of protecting customers and helping to have some more transition towards the increased surcharge, but it also helps the company, I believe, in also continuing to work on their implementation plan rather than have us in a situation where we're causing more friction at this time. So I think it's important. But it's also fair to shareholders with the ability to collect the interest and also with us looking at it for the future and looking at how that may be able to be looked at through any potential acquisition. And it also promotes our commission policies as it relates to AMI, customer engagement, and prudent capital infrastructure investment. It's reasonable and appropriate for us to look at how this fits with other future outstanding issues that may come before us, including the potential acquisition. And so for all of that, I think this is really helping us ensure that the company, which is working very focused on its customers. I just want to point out that it's 125 customer connections across 7 counties in southeastern New York. And these operations include approximately 1,270 miles of water mains and distribution lines, and 98% of those customers are in Nassau County on Long Island. So I think that's very significant, and it's really important for us to be careful in our review, and I'm very comfortable that we have done that. It's for all regulated water companies to ensure that the top priority is to reliably deliver safe and high-quality water. I think these 3 items taken together try to ensure that our oversight of that is sound, and so I'll be voting in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is to me, waking up from what appeared to be a little bit of a nightmare a while back, in a nice way. Coming out of this, I'm going to support the entire proposal. We'll benefit from AMI services and the data that all of that provides, deferring some projects, adding 7 water quality improvement projects. All of those are in the public interest, along with billing cycle changes and improved customer services. Those obviously will be good for the customers, but it'll also make the company attractive to the purchaser. With regard to the property, I think that that's a great bonus as far as this sale is concerned for the people that not only live in the village, but for all of the customers. And I think that's a great benefit. I just had one quick question on the credit, on the billing credit. Assuming the sale actually does occur, once it does occur, when is the credit applied to the customer's bills? I didn't see it in any of our information. Is there a requirement?
There's not a requirement in the order, but we expect it to happen as soon as possible after the sale. So
I would imagine it would, but theoretically they could drag it on for 10 years if there's no requirement. Correct? Okay, thank you. All right, I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Yes, they could.
Okay.
We don't expect that.
9 years.
Commissioner Edwards.
I'm going to vote in favor of it as well, especially the sale of the Seacliff. But a little bit off topic, do we have any idea when the acquisition proposal will be submitted?
So there's nothing been formally indicated to staff that when the Liberty Utilities will be making that filing. I anticipate that it could be as early as the end of February.
Okay. And just what's the process by which the staff can get involved to make sure that everything and anything and everything can be done to do something about the rates?
So the process is the companies will file the petition, and there will be a staff team developed, and we will do our due diligence to make sure that if we think the acquisition is in the public interest, we'll make that recommendation. If we do not think so, we will make that recommendation that it should not go forward.
Okay. And how long do you think that process would take about?
Well, it's gonna be a process, so it'll probably I would anticipate it to be 8 to 10 months.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard.
Thank you. I wonder if you could verify some issues for me regarding real property tax impacts on these revenue requirements. It's my understanding that in Service Area 1, 31% of the revenue requirements is real property tax. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Service Area 2, it's 35%?
Yes, that's correct.
And in service area to C, in the Seabrook, it's 51%.
That's correct. Seacliff customers pay 51% of their bill in property taxes.
I'm sorry, Tim, can you speak closer or more audibly?
That's correct. Seacliff customers pay about 51% of their bill in property taxes.
Again, with so many of our state utilities, the huge and sometimes predominant factor in corresponding bills and rates is the issue of local property taxes. I think any reasonable person would say 50 cents on a dollar going to real property taxes, not delivery of utility services, is something that could cause outrage. I just hope that in the issue of transparency, that customers are aware that this is the level of real property taxes that they pay, not through their property tax bill, but every time they pay their water bill. I think personally it's an unsustainable system, and but with that being said, I will concur on this vote, and quite frankly, I look forward to the process of these analysis during the potential acquisition of this company.
Thank you. So I will now proceed to call for a vote. As advertised, we'll do it one by one. Item 401A, my vote is in favor of the recommendations to postpone recovery of the levelization surcharge and amend the system improvement charge projects as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Alisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
The item is approved and the recommendation is adopted. Now, item 401B. My vote is in favor of the recommendation to authorize New York American Water to sell the property to the Village of Seacliff as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Alisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
This item is approved and this recommendation is adopted. And item 401C, my vote also is in favor of the recommendation to approve the final implementation plan with modifications as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Lisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes.
Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
And this item is approved and this recommendation is adopted. Thank you. We will now move to the consent agenda. And before I ask my fellow commissioners whether they wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any items on the consent agenda, I'd like to give a shout out to one specific item, item 368, Smart Path, NYPA's investment in upgrading Moses to Adirondack. This is a noteworthy investment. It's future-oriented and will go a long way to enabling the achievement of our state's energy and climate and essentially renewable policies reliably. This is a good item. But now I will turn to my fellow commissioners and ask them again whether they want to comment on or recuse from voting on any items on the consent agenda. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. Item 162, which is the tariff filing to revise the gas schedule to include a provision for flexibility in accepting applications for new or additional gas service where there is inadequate supply or capacity. This is withdrawing that. My vote is no, consistent with my voting record on similar gas tariffs and how I believe we need to handle gas issues in general. And also because while there was a SAPA filed for the original tariff request, there was no SAPA or any secretary notice filed for the request to withdraw this tariff. And I think that should be, even though it does not need to, I do believe it should have been. Items 263, 264, and 265 all are petitions that are approving the ability for these three particular companies to be able to provide low-income service, ESCO service to low-income customers. I just note that these are the three, I believe, only ESCOs that we have waivers pending for such approval, and that currently exist. I also am not taking a position on any pending petition for rehearing on other ESCO-related issues that may come. I do note that I hope that we can work on helping to look at how to focus more on low-income issues in the ESCO community. And I thank you for your work on that, the Consumer Services staff. And then on item 369, which is approving the draft EIS on offshore wind energy, I am going to be concurring. It's a necessary step to accept the draft EIS to move forward. So I am supportive, but want to share that this in no way indicates that I take a position on the final items that may come to us on offshore wind. Moreover, there are numerous questions related to offshore wind that I believe must be answered outside of this this item, and perhaps even outside of PSC Commission proceedings itself. And I do hope that we find a path forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisi? Commissioner Edwards?
On 165, the Rochester Gas and Electric, I am not going to be voting in favor of that one. I understand the need for repair because the pipeline has leak potential, but there were extensive comments that were provided by the New York State DEC and town of Wheatland, and although in the ordering clause, there were some mitigations that were addressed to address the issues. I don't think that there was enough there for me to be comfortable. So, especially as it relates to the wetlands and the route. So I won't be voting in favor of that. I just want to make a comment on 263, 264, and 265. I am going to be voting in favor. I just would ask that we could increase our efforts to better understand the internal customer satisfaction metrics for ESCOs. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
I have no comments, and I will be concurring on the agenda.
Okay. Commissioner Phillips, are you clear on the exceptions?
I would like to just read back. For Commissioner Berman, 162 is no, and 369 is concurring. And on 263, 64, 65, there were just comments, but you haven't indicated yet how you will vote. Correct. Okay. And may I also take the opportunity, Commissioner Howard, I believed on one of the 401 items, when you were asked to comment, you said you would concur, but when you were asked to vote, you said yes.
Yes, I'm concurring on all those items.
You said yes, though. Do you mean yes?
Yes.
She's drawing the distinction between approving and concurring.
Yeah. No, I'm approving.
So yes.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with those comments, I'll proceed to call for a vote. My vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Lisi?
Yes.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, with the exception.
Exactly. Commissioner Howard?
Yes.
The items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. Secretary Phillips, is there anything further to come before us today?
There's nothing further.
Thank you. Thank you all. We are adjourned.